Welcome back to the Maybe Yes Sir podcast. Today we welcome Derek Hitchner, the newest member of the Korn Ferry Tour, by way of his sixth place finish in the Fortinet Cup standings on PGA Tour Americas. Derek is from Minnesota, had a standout junior career and collegiate career at Pepperdine University, and was part of the national championship team in 2021. Derek was selected as well to the Palmer Cup, made the semifinals of the 2022 USAM. Derek, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
No problem. What part of the country are you in right now?
Yeah, I'm in Nashville currently. I grew up in Minnesota, spent 5 years, actually 6 years out in California, just in the Pepperdine area, and then moved out with my fiance to Nashville at the start of this year.
Very nice. I often go down to, where you grew up, Minneapolis, on family vacations and whatnot, and it's
Sure.
always a good time. So I enjoy the Twin Cities.
Yeah, I do as well. Yeah, it's a great spot to be.
For sure. How were you introduced to golf?
Yeah. Basically just through my dad. I think probably at the age of 5 or 6, he started taking me to the course and the range and whatnot. And he's been a lifelong golf fanatic. And so naturally that just kind of worked its way into me. And yeah, once I got started, it just really took off super organically. And I just loved going to the course and basically being there all day. And at one point my mom built these little artificial turf greens in the backyard of the house we had. And so that it just, everything was centered around golf basically for most of my life.
Right on. I was going to mention later in the podcast, but I do love your putting stroke. I think I could be totally wrong on this, but it looks like you got a little bit of a forward press, pretty natural setup, which, you don't see a lot of the forward press anymore, but I do love your putting stroke. And I think that's probably a putting stroke that you've had maybe since your mom put those putting greens in. Doesn't look like you've tinkered with it much.
No, that's true. I really haven't. I haven't done much mechanical work on it. It used to be, I wish I had a photo. It used to be significantly less, I'd say, refined, where I just had like a really old time kind of hunched over setup. And so that's changed a little bit, but in terms of the actual stroke itself, it's pretty natural.
The one thing I noticed in your golf resume is your Minnesota amateur title, and winning that at 15 under. I think that's still the tournament record, and the aggregate score of 201. That's pretty cool. I always love those local events, and capturing a state amateur like that is something that you kind of I'm sure you dreamed about as a young kid.
For sure. No, that was such an important event. Just because as I was playing junior golf in Minnesota, I feel like there'd always be interest in eventually playing in the state am. And then, but at that time when I'm in junior golf, the state am is being won by college players who seem like they're incredible players. And so it just always was a long-term target. Mm-hmm. So it was really special to be able to do that.
Yeah. And then you went on to Pepperdine. I'm curious how you landed at Pepperdine. Obviously, the campus is pretty idyllic in terms of location and everything. And, I got to know Joe Highsmith a little bit, and he was telling me about the courses that you have access to. So I'm sure that played a part, but I'm curious how you ultimately decided to go there.
Yeah. So it's super random, but I met the coach of Pepperdine, Coach Beard, at a golf camp in Ireland, of all places. And so I was at this camp, and I honestly don't think I knew what Pepperdine was prior to meeting him. But once I got to know him and we established a good rapport, it seemed like, and I became interested in Pepperdine, but at that point I didn't have the golf pedigree as a junior to realistically get a chance to go there. And then thankfully started playing better, I think, as my junior year progressed. But once I went out to Malibu to visit, I was sold within probably 3 minutes of being there. I mean, it's such a stunning place. It honestly did not feel like a college experience. It felt like I was just at a paradise for 6 years. And I mean, there were some problems, mainly being there's a fire that we had to evacuate for. Obviously, every place has its shortcomings, if you want to say, but Pepperdine was incredible. I was so thankful I got the opportunity to be there, and it was an awesome experience overall.
Yeah, as I mentioned, you're part of the national championship winning team, and pretty stacked lineup at that time. Joe Highsmith, when he's on the pod, he made a comment that he thought perhaps 5 guys from that 2-year stretch at Pepperdine would be on the PGA Tour, and it looks like that's kind of coming to fruition now with the path that you're on. I mean, William Mao's already there, Joe's there.
Right.
Dylan
Yeah,
Menantes obviously was out on Korn Ferry, and then
yeah,
Joey Versich was on PGA Tour Americas this summer as well. So pretty solid lineup.
exactly. No, a ridiculous lineup. And the thing was that Sahith wasn't even on the team the year that the team won. But yeah, obviously, so I think I've now played with three guys who have won on tour. So Joe and Will being the other two, and it's remarkable how competitive it was. And I mean, unfortunately, that often came at the expense of not playing in the lineup, which was the case for me because I didn't play in the national championship team lineup. I was driving home to Minnesota, so it was a little bittersweet in that regard. But just in the overall experience of playing with like literally at that time some of the best amateurs in the world, that's obviously translated to some of the best professionals in the world. That experience was indispensable and just so valuable to me. And so it was a remarkable experience to be able to play with all of them.
He first got on my radar at the USAM in 2022, making the semifinal, and then I believe after that you won the Western Intercollegiate at Paseo
Yeah,
Is that right?
that's right. That's right.
Honestly, that's one of my favorite golf events to watch. It's on
Yeah,
Golf
yeah,
Channel. It's on Golf Channel. It's like middle of April, so in Winnipeg we're kind of getting ramped up to
yeah. Right.
start playing.
Exactly.
That's a bucket list course for me, Paso Tiempo. It just looks like such a fun course to play.
Yeah, yeah.
That must have been a pretty rewarding win.
It was. It was especially neat because Joe had won, I think 2 years beforehand, and then Dylan won the year before, and so I'd seen, my teammates go win the tournament, and I mean, always love the golf course. And as you said, I mean, it's honestly one of my favorites in the world. And if you have the opportunity to go there, I'd say it's absolutely worth it. Just the overall setting and the aesthetic of it, and it's neat because being in Alistair Mackenzie, I think the tournament starts the day after the Masters ends, and so it feels like it's almost paired with that in a sense of you're watching the Masters at Augusta, and then you play a course that has maybe a few parallels, and so it's such a neat experience, and so that was always my favorite college event throughout my time.
Yeah, and actually, the Jim Urbina, they just went through a restoration at Paso Tiempo, and
That's right.
Jim Urbina is the lead architect there, and there's a course here in Winnipeg called St. Charles Country Club that's that has 9 holes of Alistair Mackenzie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Jim Urbina was in charge of that restoration, which was just completed last year as well. So
cool.
yeah,
Cool.
pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool tie-in there.
Yeah, that is neat.
The U.S. Amateur in 2022, you made the semifinals.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe talk about that experience. You defeated ADDC along the way. A guy who's going to be on the tour again next year. Ridgewood Country Club, amazing old golf course in Northeast United States. Maybe just talk about the USAM a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar in some regards to what we were saying with the State Am. There's always so much anticipation to play in that tournament, and I mean it's obviously the pinnacle of amateur golf, and so and it's held at literally the best courses in the country too, and so I mean it was always such an amazing experience. And I got to play in I think 4 USAMs, and I mean the venues are just otherworldly, and so that was I'd presume that'd be my last one. And I hadn't made match play before that. So that was honestly just making match play was the goal that week. And because obviously if you can just sneak into that bracket, then really anything can happen. And so I had an extremely, extremely stressful few days of stroke play, but ultimately got into a playoff that was pretty favorable in terms of odds. And so I made a par and got through, and then, just played really nicely. And it's just remarkable how fast the match play unfolds, because you have the round of 64, and then the next day has 2 rounds, and then if you get through those, and you're in the final 8 basically. And I mean it was an awesome experience, just because you know how important it is and what the potential ramifications are of playing well, and when it actually happens, when you feel like you need that, was really, really neat as well. Unfortunately, came up a little bit short than I would have wanted, but it was an unbelievable experience, and undoubtedly one of my favorite golf memories.
Yeah, really, really cool run there. At that time, were they handing out Masters exemptions if you made the final?
They were.
Okay.
Yes. Playing the semifinal round, that was obviously just a relevant fact, but it and honestly, it felt so absurd in a sense that I mean, I was aware of it, but I didn't feel like it impacted me a ton, because it just felt like it was just honestly profoundly unbelievable that I was there in the first place. And so
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was still able to be pretty present, but just didn't play well enough the last round.
Did that experience at the USM, making it to the semis, very, like I said, standout collegiate career, um, finished top 20, obviously PGA Tour University. Did that raise some expectations for you when you turned pro?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it certainly, at least to me, indicated that I was capable of a decently high level of golf. But the problem that I felt like I always struggled with was just being able to sustain that over a long period of time. And I felt like
Mm-hmm.
even during amateur golf, I would have really nice weeks, but then interspersed between those would be really frustrating golf. And but again, I mean, with how a lot of these rankings systems are established, if you have really high finishes, that can kind of carry your ranking for a long period of time. And so I felt like I was in some regards, I was capitalizing on that, meaning I had really nice weeks that helped me a lot, but there's also just, it just didn't have the consistency that I really wanted. And I felt like that's what thankfully changed a little bit this year of just being able to sustain a level of golf that I know I could do, but just hadn't been able to replicate consistently.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a lot of your highlights already, but professional golf comes with challenges, and everybody struggles at some point. You alluded to a little bit of those struggles already. But was there anything in particular that kind of sparked your turnaround in the second half of the season on PGA Tour Americas?
Yeah, I would say, so I think in Toronto it was a fourth cut I'd missed in a row in Canada. So I'd missed all of the Canadian cuts and then made, I think two or three of six in Latin. So it was really underwhelming and extremely frustrating year. Honestly, I probably shouldn't have even been in Canada, but we miraculously played this 36 hole event in Colombia on a completely water soaked golf course. Probably shouldn't have played, but we did. And I played well enough to get status into Canada. So it was a year where it felt like I was not producing any sort of decent golf. And so after that, actually, I started working with a neuroscientist who specializes in just generally athletic performance. Not even athletic performance, just performance across the board. And that helped in a number of ways. But I'd say that probably the primary areas were both how to manage my state when I'm hitting golf shots, because I felt like for the first half of the year, I just had so much internal noise and so much confusion and feeling directionless with how to play good golf. And then secondly, outside of the context of a golf shot, mostly being between shots or even between rounds, just how am I managing my overall headspace and how am I working to mitigate nerves and anxiousness, because it was just, I felt like I started developing a level of I'd probably say anxiety. No, it wasn't bad necessarily, but just the knowledge that I was playing really bad golf, and I didn't feel like I had a clear light at the end of the tunnel. And so starting work in that area, I felt like was really massive for me. And I would attribute probably that I would attribute that to being the main reason for why I started playing better.
Wow, that's amazing. Really, where is that person located?
Yeah,
That was working with you.
yeah. So he's in Charlotte. I've actually never met with him in person though, so I will at some point soon. But it was solely through phone calls and Zoom calls, basically. Basically, we just immediately started working on establishing protocols and strategies to help in the areas that I mentioned. And I mean, it probably sounds super vague, but it made a really meaningful difference. And I started seeing that in Windsor, where actually I played with Mike Brennan for the first time. I ended up playing with him a few times. But yeah, that's when I first started seeing indications that I was heading in the right direction. And then it just really, I felt like it just built on itself of quickly being able to accumulate, I'd say, trust in just seeing shots actually work the way that I intend them to, and then being able to just replicate that hole after hole. And so that was an important turning point, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned Michael.
Yes.
As an outsider, it feels to me like guys on the PGA Tour Americas kind of genuinely cheer for one another. I got to spend a little bit of time with Michael when he up here in Manitoba. It looks like he kind of traveled in a pack with him, and Hunter Wolcott and Thomas Ponder would play all practice rounds together and be real supportive of each other. Maybe you could comment on the camaraderie out there on PGA Tour Americas, and if I'm true in that assessment.
I think that's completely accurate. Probably, I would say for a few reasons, and I felt that as well because I played in practice with, I want to say there were 5 guys, maybe even 6 from Pepperdine who were playing up on Americas this year, and the year before it was even, I think it was more. So part of it is just because it's a generally pretty young demographic, and so you're playing with a lot of guys from college who you've become familiar and close with, but I think also there's just a joint recognition that it's a pretty tough road because, I mean, only really the top 20 finishers in a tournament are making any sort of money and any sort of profit, I guess, on a week to week basis. And so I think there's just a joint recognition that it's just, everyone is struggling. Everyone's in a challenging position where if you don't play well, then it looks pretty bleak basically. And yeah. And so I think that fosters camaraderie, just knowing that in a sense, you're kind of in it with other guys, even though obviously you're competing against them at the same time. But that's something that I really did enjoy, is the camaraderie that felt like existed, and felt like the sincerity of people rooting for each other, because everyone knows that good golf on the Americas level is really, really helpful in terms of advancing one's career. And so it's cool just seeing guys who are just genuinely good guys who you like rooting for end up succeeding.
Yeah, and it looks like, you and Michael specifically have had a real mutual respect for not only each other's games, but, who you are as people. The other thing that you guys kind of have in common is consistency with your caddy. And so Michael had his friend Jeff, who caddied for him all year, and you of course had your fiance caddying for you. I don't know if she was in South America, but for sure Canada. Maybe touch on that, the consistency and support that she provided.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was indispensable to, just keep my head on my shoulders basically. But no, she went to South America for 2 events, and in Ecuador, similar to Colombia, we had just a really brutal week in the sense of we were playing this waterlogged golf course at 9,000 feet of elevation, and probably shouldn't have been playing there either. But I subjected her to, I think it was a 32 hole day of caddying, just slogging through mud, and I felt so badly about that.
Yeah.
Thankfully, did not deter her from caddying again. And so she wasn't in Canada for a few of the early weeks, and then starting in Minnesota for the last 4. I think starting in Minnesota was the 4th to last event. So starting from there, and then she was with me, and then started caddying in Edmonton. And no, I mean, it was an awesome experience. I absolutely loved having her there. I mean, usually what I would try to do is, I think I carried my own bag once in Canada, but then usually had caddies from previous years, so guys I was familiar with. And I feel like that's just an important thing for me, is just having the familiarity and comfort with a person. And so obviously with my fiance, there's familiarity and comfort to its highest level, basically. And so it just helped just bring kind of a lightheartedness and enjoyment to the process, especially as that process was getting increasingly stressful, just because as I was playing better, I was climbing closer to the top 10 mark. And so just having her as a kind of as an outlet of sorts, but also just a really reassuring presence was something that I think I really benefited from down the stretch.
Well, yeah, I mean, Minnesota, you lost in a playoff, so that kind of set you up for the rest of the season. Then you went to Edmonton and finished second as well, and then ended the season with tied for 6th, I believe, at the Fortinet Championship. So a really strong finish to your season.
Yeah, thank you.
Does seeing guys like Johnny Kiefer and Neil Shipley and recently, Beren both made a run at the Korn Ferry Tour Championship, all guys who played on PGA Tour Americas last year, does seeing their success instill more confidence in you next season on KFT, knowing that, Derek's good golf will translate to the Korn Ferry Tour next year?
I think undoubtedly, because I mean, and there are tons of other examples too, but just of seeing golf at that level immediately translate to the higher level is undoubtedly affirming and kind of confidence inducing, just because, especially, I mean, well, the thing is with Johnny and I'd put Mike in that category now. They absolutely dominated on that level. But I mean, there's still a recognition that if we're both playing good golf, it should be pretty competitive. And so but yeah, no, I mean, it's super exciting seeing how that golf translates. And but I did feel like I had experience of knowing that, just given who I played with in college, because seeing Joe ascend the rankings so quickly, and William and Sahith too. I mean, all those guys are so incredibly talented. And so it's not surprising at all, but it's just, I think just the fundamental fact of knowing that good golf will translate at any level is great to know. And that's also something that they've told me too, is that, if you're contending in the best amateur events and the best Americas events, and that quality of golf will also contend basically everywhere.
Yeah, I've made this point a few times, but as Canadians, we're really fortunate to have PGA Tour Americas. I've drawn the comparison before to, it's kind of like the NBA Summer League, where guys are getting minutes up here, and the opportunity to see college standouts, and walk the fairways with them is really a cool opportunity, and I think one of the best golf spectator opportunities that you can have. Yeah,
I agree.
It's a great tour for us, and the process works. Like you said, there's all kinds of examples of guys, not only the past few years, but you mentioned Joe Highsmith. There's been Will Gordon. There's been Jake Knapp.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on, right?
It really does. It really does. Yeah.
How are you now preparing for final stage of Q School? Do you have any Monday qualifiers lined up? Are you playing some mini tour stuff? How are you going to stay sharp?
Yeah. That's a work in progress. I'm not entirely sure. I've taken a couple weeks of being pretty inactive since Vancouver, but definitely am working to ramp back up just before Q School. But it's so odd having, essentially from the point from when Vancouver ended, having over 2 months of nothing that was essentially necessary to play, because in the previous year I finished in Canada and then was at first stage a couple weeks later. And so, I think just working to stay as sharp as I can, and finding a few competitive reps to do. And I'll probably play in 1 or 2 Monday qualifiers as well. But I mean, the Q School itself, I think, will be it's an extremely important tournament, but also a nice kind of warm up and ramp up to the Korn Ferry season starting as well. But yeah, nothing too rigorous, I would say, in the next month and a half.
So Q School's in Florida, different type of grass, obviously Bermuda grass. You grew up in Minnesota, no Bermuda, played collegiately. California, no Bermuda grass. Is that something that guys like me just kind of put too much stock into, or is it easy to translate your game to like that type of course conditions?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I do think the grass makes a meaningful difference, especially, I mean, going from, well, I would say that happens in a number of areas, but also just visually. I mean, say in a chip shot, for example, the ball, it looks like it sits differently on just like a Canadian piece of bent grass versus some Bermuda in Jacksonville. And so not only is there a visual component of that, but it also plays differently, because certain grass types have stronger grain where, if the club enters the ground a certain way, then it just will react differently. And so I wouldn't discount that at all. I think it's having experience on different grass conditions, I think, is pretty vital. And I was super lucky just with being at Pepperdine, because we had a schedule that consisted of a lot of travel to different states and different grass types. And so I felt like that helped foster some better familiarity with everything.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I felt like I specifically benefited from the fact that, having grown up in Minnesota and then going to Canada for the last couple of years, it felt like conditions were always super similar, and grass types were things that I had seen before. And so, that's meaningful when, for example, someone could be growing up in Florida and they're having to factor in grain on every single putt. And then you get to Canada and a lot of courses don't really have meaningful grain. And so, it's one of those things that doesn't maybe seem that obvious, but it probably has a pretty meaningful impact on how people play.
Yeah. Like you said, guys like of your caliber and had some experience playing in various territories and regions, you kind of adapt quickly, I imagine. Right?
Well, I'm not sure if I did, but I had 5 years of college golf and a year after that to kind of work my way there. And so I think having that much time was helpful.
It's a sad time of year up here in Canada. My home course closed on Sunday, so now we're getting into winter, and everything that comes with that. We won't be able to take our clubs outside until springtime. So you grew up.
It's unfortunate.
You grew up in a similar climate though in Minneapolis. Growing up, I'm curious, how did you practice during the winter? There's obviously golf simulators now. They're prevalent. They're everywhere. And, we have a golf dome, it's called, where you could practice inside. But
For sure.
what's some advice for us Canadians who are going to try to get a little bit better this winter?
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, having grown up in that routine, I did not enjoy it at all.
Mm-hmm.
I luckily was very fortunate to have parents who would help basically take me to a warm state, maybe once a month or something, or we would have winter break for school. So I'd maybe spend 2 weeks in Florida or something. But honestly, in terms of winter golf, it was pretty minimal. And that was honestly one of the main reasons for why I went to school in California. It was just, I felt like I needed it developmentally because guys I was competing with were literally playing twice as much golf as me. And so I felt like to give myself the best chance to develop and progress, I needed to just play more golf. And because there's always that adjustment period if you're inside for 6 months and then you start going back outside, at least for me, it took a lot of time to get comfortable. I would say we also had a golf dome that I probably preferred to simulator golf, just because I just think seeing the ball fly and being able to recognize what your launch is like and what the spin looks like, I think are all factors that are really important. And I never loved simulator golf because it's such a different sensory experience because you're basically trapped in this little box where you're hitting into a screen, but it feels a little claustrophobic. It's like, especially if I'm hitting long irons or a driver on the simulator, it feels like I'm just hitting it right into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just didn't love what that was like. And so I wouldn't do it a ton. So if I were to give any recommendations, I would probably say maybe spend more time in the dome, but everyone's different. And, I mean, I think there's a lot of value as well, though, to indoor golf, in that it can be a good time if you need to make some swing changes or address some mechanical things to really be able to focus on that without worrying about the results of your score. So I think there's certainly value to it. I try to limit my indoor golf as much as I can.
Yeah, for me, simulator golf is just a way to stay loose and have fun and go there with a buddy. Go there with a buddy, and you can play. Right. You could tee up Augusta and have some fun and have a beer and some laughs and do that. Yeah, I'm with you. Every time I go, like, our golf dome it's probably like 100 yards long, but even just seeing that first 100 yards of flight, especially like you said with a driver or long irons, there's a lot more feedback I think that the people could use as opposed to the simulator.
Totally agree. Because I'm a huge proponent of hitting kind of creative golf shots. Mm-hmm. Not that I do that, but just in terms of learning how to produce certain curvatures and trajectories, and being able to kind of build awareness of what that requires. When you have a dome that is, 80 to 100 yards, you can still do that to an extent, where you can pick out little targets and try to kind of shape shots to them. And so I think that's a super helpful way to practice.
Yeah,
basically mainly what I would do in the golf dome.
Yeah, I agree totally. That's all I had, Derek. I really appreciate your time. Good luck as you move forward, getting towards Q School and next year on Korn Ferry Tour. Hopefully we could catch up again down the road.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Derek.